Good afternoon, and we're calling this meeting of the Readiness Subcommittee to order. Several of my members will be coming in a few minutes, so just to let our witnesses know, they're in other meetings right now in subcommittees that are overlapping. And also we expect to have a vote probably about 2:30, so we may have to break briefly and go to that vote. We want to welcome our witnesses here. We think this is going to be a crucial hearing for us on our readiness in the Pacific region. We have three witnesses that bring a great deal of experience and expertise to this issue, and we welcome them here today. First of all, we have Mr. Michael Shiver, the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Asian and Pacific Security Affairs, East Asia. Michael, thank you for being here. We're looking forward to your testimony with our members. We also have Major General Randolph Elise. General, thank you. The General is the Director, J5, for Strategic Planning and Policy in the U.S. Pacific Command. General, as always, we appreciate your service to our country, and we thank you for your willingness to be here today and to lend your expertise to the subcommittee. And finally, we have the Honorable Jacqueline Fanasteel, and thank you for being here, Jacqueline. She's the Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Energy, Installations, and Environment. This subcommittee is unusual in that it's probably one of the most bipartisan subcommittees in Congress. We're all trying to look to make sure that we've answered the question, are we ready? And that's the purpose of our hearing. My partner in this endeavor and the ranking member from Guam is Madeline Berdello, and I would like to defer at this time to Madeline for her opening remarks. Ms. Berdello.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate your willingness to hold this hearing on long-term readiness challenges in the Asia-Pacific region, which is certainly very important to me. As we've heard from witnesses in our previous hearings and briefings, this area of the world requires our focus and our attention. Before I begin with my statement, I would like to recognize the people of Japan and ask that we keep them in our thoughts and prayers as they recover from the horrific tragedy of last week's earthquake and tsunami. These unfortunate events, however, underscore the importance of our alliance and our strong relationship with the Japanese people. Our military forces in Japan are helping with search and recovery efforts. Further, other civilian agencies such as USAID and FEMA and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission are assisting Japan. In the wake of this unfortunate tragedy, we must continue to focus our military resources on this important region of the world. Nearly 42% of all U.S. trade occurs with Asian Pacific nations, which make this area critical to our national economic security. And I applaud this administration for its greatly increased focus on the Asia-Pacific region. To highlight this point, one of the first major actions of the Obama administration was the signing of the so-called Guam International Agreement by Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and then Foreign Minister Nakasone. However, despite greater focus, we must continue to assess the readiness of our forces to protect our economic, political, and other strategic interests in this vital region. One of the most important strategic matters is continuing to fulfill the United States obligation under the Guam International Agreement, which is based on the 2005 U.S.-Japan Alliance Transformation and Realignment for the Future Agreement. This agreement outlines the numerous realignments of military personnel in Japan. Of the greatest impact to Guam is the construction in northern Okinawa of a replacement facility for Marine Corps Air Station Futenma. This new facility will allow the transfer of more than 8,000 Marines and nearly 9,000 family members from Okinawa, Japan, to Guam. This committee has been supportive of this strategic realignment in the past, and I hope that we will remain so in the future. I ask our witnesses today to make clear to the committee the significance of tangible progress by Japan toward the Futenma replacement facility and what commitments the United States must make in the meantime, to achieve the goal of moving the Marines to Guam. While dealing with the challenges of the military buildup on Guam, we must not overlook the strategic importance of Guam's location and the value of the freedom of action from bases on Guam. Just this past weekend, several Global Hawks based at Andersen Air Force Base, Guam, conducted sorties over Japan to assist the region with mapping the destruction caused by the massive tsunami. Our strategic location in the Pacific can never be overstated. The governor of Guam, Eddie Calvo, recently signed a programmatic agreement with the Department of Defense that outlines a process for consultations to ensure the preservation of certain historic sites and paves the way for spending military construction funding authorized in previous fiscal years. The administration has budgeted for certain infrastructure support that will help to improve our quality of life on Guam and at the same time enhance the military mission. Further, the U.S. government has been successful in obtaining financing for certain other improvement projects on Guam that are needed for the buildup to be successful. However, I remain concerned about the placement of a proposed firing range on Guam and would ask today's witnesses to explain to the committee the strategic necessity of the range site as currently proposed. Many have questioned whether alternatives to the Route 15 ranges were adequately vetted. There have also been questions raised as to whether the Navy properly examined alternatives that would keep the ranges within their existing footprint, thus negating the need to pursue leasing government of Guam land adjacent to Route 15. While I respect the ongoing process wherein the Department of Defense will conduct discussions with the governor over the Route 15 range location, I would caution that it may be very difficult for DoD to reach a deal that will be approved by the Guam legislature, who ultimately approves the leasing or the sale of government of Guam lands. I continue to urge DoD to consider alternatives such as more robust training capability on Tinian to include individual skill qualifications. Finally, it is important to reiterate, as I have in previous hearings, that we must keep in mind the threats we face in this region of the world. China's secretive military buildup, coupled with North Korea's continuing nuclear ambitions, are certainly at the forefront of our strategic posture in Asia. However, we must not lose sight of other non-traditional threats in this region, such as the southern Philippines or southern Thailand. I hope that the witnesses will discuss our strategic posture in the Asia-Pacific region through both a military asset framework as well as a soft power framework. This administration's focus on military-to-military engagements is very important to establishing a greater cultural understanding and fosters stability in our region. In particular, the mill-to-mill efforts with China, I believe, can help us avoid misunderstandings that will lead to far greater concerns in the future. So, ladies and gentlemen, I look forward to the testimonies from each of you as I yield back my time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Madeline, for those remarks. And as we discussed prior to the hearing, I ask unanimous consent that we dispense with the 5-minute rule for this hearing and depart from regular order so that members may ask questions during the course of the discussion. I think this will provide a roundtable type forum and will enhance the dialogue of these very important issues. Without objection, that's so ordered. And just so the witnesses know, we've explained it to all three of you. We do things a little differently in here. We try to really get at some issues, and rather than have 5 minutes of staccato questions, if one of the members wants a follow-up question, Chair will recognize them, and we'll try to do that to keep the dialogue going. The other thing I ask the members for is permission to submit for the record a written statement that I've prepared, and any of the members that have written statements, feel free to submit those for the record. Without objection, all the statements will be entered in the record. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to do to you now what I'm going to ask you to do, I'm going to do myself, and that is take my written remarks and put them aside. For these kind of hearings, normally what we do is this. You submit to us written statements, which you've done very admirably. We thank you for that. We read your statements, and so we appreciate the time that you put in those statements and the fact that you delivered them to us. Then oftentimes what we have is our witnesses will take about 5 minutes each, and they give us a regurgitation of what they put in the written statements, but we've already read the written statements, so we don't need to do that. So I want to change it a little bit today, and I want you to take the written remarks that you might have and just put them aside for a moment. If you want to submit them for the record, we'll read them. But here's what I want to pose to you that you can start, and we're going to give you each 5 minutes or so to have a bite at this question. The goal of this committee is to ask a very simple question. Are we ready? And over again, our witnesses come in, and the response that they rightly give us back is ready for what? We should be having a strategy that we can use as a yardstick so that we can compare where we are against that strategy. We try to do that in the Quadrennial Defense Review and the National Defense Strategy. But as you know, more and more there's a consensus building that the Quadrennial Defense Review and the National Defense Strategy is driven a lot by budget and bureaucratic desire simply to reinforce what they're already doing. In fact, when the independent panel was created to look at the QDR, that was the exact conclusion that that bipartisan group determined, and they used the word like train wreck if we continue doing what we're doing. So we have to kind of reach to get the strategy and build the yardsticks that we're comparing our military to make sure that, in fact, we're ready. Just last week, we had our deputy chiefs sitting right where you're sitting and where Mr. Schiffler is sitting. We had the deputy chief for the Marine Corps, Jacqueline, where you're sitting. We had the deputy chief for the Army. And the two of them agreed on one thing. They said the greatest component that they could have for readiness was time. They needed to be able to react quickly and as quickly as they possibly could. So, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, the question I have for you is this. If we look at the Pacific and we recognize that we may not as a committee have a strategy to use as a yardstick, one of the things we know is that the most probable conflict we would have may not be with China, but if we ever had a conflict, probably the most devastating conflict we would have with China. None of us want that conflict. We hope it doesn't take place. But when we're looking for readiness, we want to make sure that we're prepared. Because oftentimes, if we have a lack of capability, that determines decisions that players make in that area. So the question I'd like for you to start with in your 5 minutes or so today is this. We know if we don't have a strategy that we can get our hands around, we know that from our readings China does. One of their strategies we know is their anti-access area denial strategy that they have been trying to implement. A year ago, Secretary Gates directed the Air Force and the Navy to develop an air-sea battle concept to address that anti-access denial problem. First question I'd like for you to respond to is that concept ready? Do we have it? And are we prepared in our readiness to implement that strategy? If not, when's it coming? The second thing we know is my dear friend sitting to my left, not too far from her home, she's been willing to take me and show me those huge fuel reserves that are sitting there on Guam. We know that one of the strategies as part of the denial strategy that China has would be able to do something to those fuel reserves. So the other question I have for you to be responding to is, if something happened to those fuel reserves, how long would it take us to replace them, and where would that replacement have to come from? And then the third thing is, if we look at China's strategy, it's very clear from their writings that one of the things they believe is that the United States can't endure a long conflict, that we need to have short conflicts, and they're prepared for a long one. The question for you is, if we had a conflict, and that conflict had a high-intensity operations that lasted more than a month, is our industrial base capable of supporting that kind of long-term conflict, and if so, for how long? I know that's a lot, but it kind of sets the parameters that we need to be looking at for readiness in the Pacific. And so with that, Mr. Shiver, I'm going to ask you if you would start, whatever response that you might have to that, and feel free to interject anything else that you'd like to in that.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ranking Member Bordallo, and the other distinguished members of the committee, and thank you for the privilege of allowing us to appear before you today. Let me try to provide you in my opening comments with the strategic context that underlies our approach to the Asia-Pacific region and how we are preparing our presence and pursuing our presence and our policy in the region. And I think in so doing, I'll be able to shed some light on the questions that you've raised. Before I begin my comments, however, I want to join Ranking Member Bordallo in reiterating that our thoughts and our prayers today are with the people of Japan. I was in Japan last week when the earthquake struck, and though I was not near the area affected by the tsunami, the magnitude of the earthquake, in both real and psychological terms, was palpable. We are still learning the total extent of the devastation, and the United States is working side by side with the people of Japan, the Japanese government, and the self-defense forces to manage the consequences of the earthquake and the tsunami. In addition to the humanitarian assistance and helping to address ongoing nuclear issues at the Fukushima Daiichi plant, U.S. forces are engaged in helicopter search and rescue operations, and support from U.S. Navy ships, including the Ronald Reagan Carrier Strike Group, are providing services such as water purification, medical teams, and hospital beds. Our forward presence in Japan and throughout the Asia-Pacific region has allowed us to respond to Japan's urgent needs quickly, and we will continue to facilitate rapid engagement to provide whatever assistance our Japanese friends require. You have asked us to address the question, are we ready? And in your comments, Mr. Chairman, you elucidated some of the issues that we need to dig into as we address that question. It's an important question and one with many facets. And at the risk of stating what other witnesses have stated before, I do want to be clear from the outset that the Department of Defense and our men and women in uniform, wherever they may be stationed, at home and abroad, are indeed ready to meet any of the challenges that we may face in the region in the near, medium, or in the long term. Our ability to respond rapidly and effectively to provide assistance to our Japanese friends is one facet of the question, are we ready? And especially the related question of ready for what? It will come as no surprise to members of this committee, and as the ranking member pointed out, that the Asia-Pacific region is the most dynamic region in the world today. It holds over half the world's population, more than $1 trillion in annual U.S. trade, 15 of the world's largest ports, and is home to 6 of the world's largest armies, China, India, North Korea, South Korea, Russia, Japan, and of course our own. Over the past 6 decades, the region has experienced extraordinary growth, in large part because of the peace, stability, and prosperity that our security presence, our robust U.S. military presence made possible for all states in the region. That military presence remains critical to our long-term readiness and to ensuring that peace and prosperity continue to prevail in the Asia-Pacific region. The United States and the Department of Defense remain committed to our enduring presence in the Asia-Pacific and to the investments in forces and capabilities necessary for protecting our national interests and those of our allies and partners in the region, as well as for meeting the full range of potential traditional and non-traditional 21st century security challenges. I would like to focus for a little bit in getting at some of the questions that the Chairman raised, focus my attention on 3 particular issues: the rise of China, North Korea, and our evolving regional posture. I'll keep my comments brief in the remaining time that I have, and my written testimony provides a more detailed assessment. As you know, over the past 30 years, China has transformed itself from an impoverished country to the world's 2nd largest economy. As its economy has grown, so has its capabilities across a range of measures, including its military capabilities. President Obama and Secretary Gates have stated that the United States welcomes and encourages a strong and prosperous China that makes positive contributions to the stability, resilience, and growth of the international system. We continue to see positive examples of cooperation and partnership from China on certain regional challenges. There are, however, other areas, such as its military modernization efforts its opaquely defined long-term strategic intentions, and questions about the development of its anti-access and area denial capabilities that are causing concern in the United States and around the region. In this respect, long-term readiness means that the United States must continue to work with our allies and partners, and with China, to positively shape China's rise both within the Asia-Pacific region and globally. U.S. strategy must be flexible enough to anticipate and balance multiple possible outcomes, and must be able to capitalize on the cooperative potential of the U.S.-China relationship, while also managing the risk inherent in China's rise. And that includes in the investments that the Department is undertaking precisely to make sure that we can counter anti-access and area denial capabilities. If I can ask the indulgence of the committee to continue for a little bit.
You go ahead, Mr. Shiver.
As China continues to rise and its military capabilities continue to increase, both the United States and China benefit from having a healthy, stable, and reliable military-to-military relationship. During the recent state visit by President Hu Jintao, both sides agreed on the need for enhanced and substantive dialogue and communication at all levels. While we will continue to engage in dialogue with the Chinese, we will also continue to strengthen our posture, presence, and capabilities in the region, and to strengthen our alliance partnerships to ensure a common view of how the United States can best continue to work in and with the region for peace and stability. The second issue that I would like to highlight briefly is the continuing challenge of North Korean provocations. As members of this committee are well aware, North Korea continues to be a complicated security threat. In face of North Korean provocations, including the sinking of the Cheonan and the shelling of Waipido, the United States and our ally, the Republic of Korea, are enhancing our deterrent capabilities and so ensuring that we are fully prepared to meet any threat from North Korea. The United States has drawn ever closer in our bilateral relationship with our allies of South Korea and Japan, and have also seen positive progress in the past year in trilateral relations as well. Critical to ensuring our long-term readiness to meet a North Korean threat is maintaining a forward-deployed military posture on the peninsula. It is our forward presence, 28,500 strong, that effectively communicates our resolve to defend the Republic of Korea and preserve our vital interests in Asia, and our regular exercises like Key Resolve and Full Eagle serve to enhance U.S. ROC alliance ability to defend the ROC and to protect the region. Lastly, let me address the efforts we are taking to implement the realignment roadmap and our broader posture moves in the region. As you know, the Department of Defense is evaluating U.S. global posture on an ongoing basis to better position us and our forces to meet the demands of the myriad emerging threats and provocations in the region. This subject will be addressed in greater detail in an upcoming global posture review. However, the important point to note for this hearing is that the U.S. defense posture in Asia, where Secretary Gates has stated that our goal is to maintain our posture in Northeast Asia while enhancing it in Southeast Asia, is shifting to one that is more geographically distributed, operationally resilient, and politically sustainable. While the focus on the implementation of the relocation of Marine Corps Air Station Futenma has been intense, the United States and Japan are working closely together on FRF and on Guam. It is important to note that the government of Japan has publicly affirmed the importance of the U.S. alliance, of the U.S. Marine Corps having forward-deployed forces on Okinawa, and of moving forward with the Futenma replacement facility at Camp Schwab, Hinoko. Indeed, events in the region have conspired to remind us all of the importance and the necessity of Marine forces on Okinawa, and the vital role in both deterring potential conflict and responding to crisis played by U.S. forces in Japan, including the 3rd Marine Expeditionary Forces in Okinawa. This capacity to respond quickly to regional challenges, both traditional and non-traditional challenges, rests in no small part on the maintenance of rapidly deployable ground forces in the region, and we look forward to continuing to work with the government of Japan to move forward with the full implementation of the realignment roadmap. The Asia-Pacific region is one where America has deep roots and enduring interests. As the United States looks to the challenges, threats, and opportunities of the future, the Department of Defense remains focused on protecting American interests and allies against the range of threats and challenges we will face together in the 21st century. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your indulgence. I look forward to engaging more deeply on some of the questions that you raised, and let me turn to my colleagues for their comments.
Thank you, Mr. Shiver, and again, we appreciate your expertise in coming here. Now, Mr. Shiver did exactly the opposite, though, what I'm asking you guys to do. I know it's comfortable to hang on to those prepared remarks, but we've read those. What we want you to do is try to address the readiness issue. And, General, maybe you're the perfect person to do that. So, General Alice, if you would please see if you could address those remarks and throw those written remarks away, because we just want to hear your expertise. We can put those in the record, but the time we've got, how are we prepared? Are we ready to meet those challenges? General, thank you for being here.
All right, sir. I'll keep my remarks brief here. I would ask that the written remarks that I've submitted be included.
And we're including all of your written remarks. Appreciate your time in preparing them.
And thank you, sir. And so Chairman Forbes and Ms. Bordeo, and members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to appear today and discuss the readiness challenges here in the Pacific. I do want to acknowledge, before I continue with my responses here, my condolences to our very close ally in Asia, Japan, as Mr. Shiver has already mentioned, during their ongoing trial here, this great earthquake and tsunami. I just want you to rest assured the U.S. Pacific Command is doing everything in our power to assist the Japanese people during this hour of need. I'd also like to extend my best wishes to Representative Giffords and her husband, Mark. We hope to see her back soon, fulfilling her responsibilities as a member of the committee. I wanted to build on one comment that Mr. Shiver had made as he talked about China and the rise of China as as we consider the rise of China. And I wanted to emphasize, as I had a conversation previously with Ms. Bordeo about the importance of dialogue between the Chinese and the U.S. sides. Both myself and Mr. Shiver get to occasionally participate in dialogues with the Chinese, usually with the PLA is who we talk with, and I think those dialogues are beneficial. Yes, I mean, they're scripted in a certain degree. There is a degree that we tend to hear the same points coming back from the Chinese, but the fact that we're able to meet and actually have a dialogue together, I think, is important. One of my responsibilities is to function on the MMCA, the Military and Maritime Consultative Agreement, which is our meeting that we have with the Chinese to discuss operational safety in international airspace and off the coast of China and in the international waters. And I think I would comment that I have seen effect out of that dialogue. It has done much to ensure that tensions when U.S. and Chinese forces interact remain low, and I think there's great benefit in the overall dialogue between the two sides, even if sometimes it may just appear to be a exchange of talking points. I think nevertheless it's an important interchange that we have. Turning to the topic of the question on the air-sea battle, I would like to just point out a few things about that. It is, as you noted, Mr. Chairman, an attempt to address anti-access area denial. I would point out that it's a concept that is broader in thinking than just looking at the Chinese situation. We're looking at this more broadly across the globe on how countries are attempting to deny access to U.S. forces and how this might address it. I do think there is significant and effective work going on currently in near-term initiatives. I would just note we have met on several occasions recently with the Undersecretary of Defense for AT&L, Mr. Carter, and he has made substantial progress in addressing some of these anti-access and area denial issues in the current defense program. Just as a list of a few items here, there's modernization efforts underway to the tune of $4.5 billion in the fit-up on the F-22 to leverage radar and electronic protection technologies coming out of the JSF. We have $1.6 billion over the fit-up going into F-15 radars to address electronic attack and warfare issues that they would have in this A2AD environment. There are also efforts underway with the E-18 Growler, our AMRAAM weapon systems, our Aegis-equipped ships, and improving anti-submarine capabilities that will address anti-access area denial challenges. So I think there's been great progress made in the department here. They're moving forward rapidly, and I'm encouraged by what I've seen. Even today, we talked with the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Force Development, addressing this particular issue of anti-access area denial across the globe, and I think they're making good progress in their long-range strike family of systems that are addressing the issues we're going to have with anti-access area denial holistically across the spectrum of military capabilities and capacities that we would need. I do think it's a concept that is going to take a number of years to implement. It's not something that's going to occur, in 1 or 2 years. I think it's a long-term question that the Department is addressing. So clearly funding the initiatives that the Department puts forward to address anti-access air denial will be very important to us. But I think we have a good handle on how we're approaching this particular issue and the things we're going to need to do in the future to ensure access for U.S. forces and to be that stabilizing influence that the U.S. has been in Asia really for over 60 years. Thank you.
Thank you, General. Madam Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congresswoman Bordallo, distinguished members of this committee, I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today. I will focus my comments on the realignment on Guam, specifically to the question of are we ready? And that will begin with the recognition of the strategic importance of Guam. The Marine Corps relocation, along with the other Defense Department alignments to Guam, represents a unique opportunity to strategically realign the future posture in the Pacific for the next 50 years. We need to get this right. And this time last year, we were still working on the environmental impact statement for the realignment. We had some 10,000 comments that we were working on. Since then, we have moved forward. We have issued the final environmental impact statement. We have issued the record of decision. We have made decisions in certain areas for moving the facilities to Guam. We've deferred decision on the aircraft carrier berth and on the ranges, as the Congresswoman pointed out earlier. We have made some progress just this week. We signed the programmatic agreement, which allows us to move forward, completing the Section 106 for the National Historic Preservation Act process. With that, we're now able to start letting contracts and beginning some military construction, associated with the realignment. I should point out that a long-term positive relationship with the people of Guam is essential to the success of the Marine Corps mission in the Pacific. With this in mind, we have laid out what we're calling the 4 pillars of working with the community in Guam. And they are that we will work towards one Guam, in other words, that outside of the base and on the base will be of the same community, that we will pursue a green Guam, an environmentally preferred base, and help Guam with their renewable resources. And we'll make sure that access to the cultural sites, specifically the Pocket site, would be protected. In addition, in recognizing the amount of land that the Department of Defense already consumes on Guam, we will commit to making sure that we do not expand and, in fact, that we reduce the footprint on Guam. We believe that our commitment to these 4 pillars will allow us to work well with the government, with the people of Guam. We've worked with Governor Calvo in trying to gain access to the land that we'll need for the training, for the Marines' training. And that's a really critical element of the are we ready. We need to be ready to train the Marines when they come to Guam. And so we're focusing our attention on getting the land that we're going to need for the training resources. This is an important year for the Guam realignment. The start of construction is imminent, and additional contracts will be awarded in the next weeks and months. Building on the projects from the FY10 and FY11, we are seeking additional funding for FY12 to begin vertical construction and to allow off-island workers. Also this year, we will continue the discussions with the government and the legislature and the private landowners to begin an agreement in principle for the land that we need for the ranges. The Guam realignment is multifaceted, dynamic endeavor with many component parts. Successful execution will be the key to the Department's success in the Pacific. We'll continue to work with our partners in Guam and Japan in the Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas to develop solutions to the challenges we're facing. Thank you for the opportunity to address you today. I look forward to continue to work with you, and I'm available for your questions.
Thank you, Madam Secretary, and thank all of our witnesses for their comments. Normally, I defer my questions to the end, but I'm going to start because I'm going to come back with the 3 questions that I asked at the beginning to see if anyone is willing to address them. And let me set it in a context for you. There was a sunny summer day that took place before I was born, when Oahu had just beginning to wake up in the morning. Most of the people who had been out doing what they would do on a Saturday night were still sleeping in. There were a handful of people that were policing the area. A fleet was making its way up to the northern portion of Oahu. It was sailing inside some rain squalls that were taking place, staying out of the commercial lane so that shipping couldn't pick them up, the planes couldn't pick them up. As it got to the northern portion of Oahu, they launched 3 planes, types of planes: fighters, bombers, and torpedo planes. Just as they came into Oahu, sun came up. They were able to see their targets. Our battleships were all lined up in Battleship Alley. They did all the things they were supposed to do. By the time our fighters could scramble and get up, they had already gone. They landed back on the airfield. Next thing that happened, as soon as they landed, another wave came in, and that was successful. As you would hear that, you would think that would be Pearl Harbor. As all of you, or many of you know, that was not Pearl Harbor. That was a war game we did in 1932, 10 years before, with Admiral Yarnell. And the Department of Defense threw it out because they basically said it was unfair to attack on Sunday and nobody would attack on Sunday. If we had seen that 10 years before, we would have been better prepared 10 years later. Now, I say that because I come back to looking at the scenarios. When we're asking if we're ready, we're not just asking what our goals are or what our philosophies are. We're trying to ask, are we ready when those conflicts come? We know that there is a strategy by the Chinese. We hope that that doesn't happen. All of us want to have the dialogue, but it is the anti-access area denial problem. They've told me that. They've told many of the members here. They write about it all the time. If we deny the strategy, let us know. But if there's a strategy there, we had the Secretary saying a year ago we were going to create this concept. My question for any of you today is, do we have the concept? Not are we making good progress, but do we have that concept today? And if we don't have the concept today, when can we expect to have that? Anybody want to tackle it for us?
I will try to take a first cut at that question, Mr. Chairman. I think it's fair to say that as we talk about air-sea, that it's an evolving operational concept. But the important point, and I think this is something that General Alice got at, is that the air-sea concept needs to be put inside the larger framework of the activities that we are undertaking to counter anti-access and area denial challenges, not just as it might relate to China, but as the General said, globally, wherever those challenges may occur. We take as a predicate the necessity for the United States to maintain its ability to project power across the globe and to maintain the integrity of U.S. alliances and partnerships. And to achieve that objective and to make sure that anti-access and area denial threats and capabilities will not, in fact, slow the deployment of forces into a theater or prevent U.S. forces from operating in a particular theater.
Mr. Shiver, I don't want to cut you off, but I know other people have questions.
I'm going to be getting to the enumeration of
you could cut that so we can.
Sure. There are a number of things that we are currently engaged in. There are procurement activities that include the new penetrating bomber and pressing forward with the mass production of the F-35. We are expanding procurement of proven cruise missile systems. We're looking to procure a robust air defense network that will prevail against ballistic and cruise missile attacks. We're upgrading the B-2 bomber. We're modernizing our fourth-generation fighters with new sensors, electronic protection, and modernized missiles. We're ensuring resiliency by hardening key logistics infrastructures, building dispersed operating locations, and creating redundant and resilient command and control networks with increased bandwidth. We're also pursuing, in addition to these investments, new concepts of operations, including new horizons in power projection by integrating the presence of the Navy with the global reach of the Air Force, which is the essence of what the air-sea battle concept of operations is all about. And we're pursuing new technologies that will allow us to counter competitors' anti-access and air denial investments, specifically their investments in ballistic missiles, counterspace, and cyber capabilities. And we're examining such technologies as prompt global strike capabilities to be able to precisely strike time value, high sensitive, or time sensitive, high value targets.
Thank you.
So when you put that together as a package, I think it provides a fairly robust response to the threats and challenges that you outline.
Thank you. General, do we have the concept?
The concept is in development, which is what we're currently doing and what the Navy and the Air Force are currently in the process of doing. And they've started that work over the past year or so, I think extending beyond a year. It's still something that's in development, and there are many enabling pieces of that once we have it finally developed. So I think, as Mr. Shiver is saying, it's evolving in its development. It's at the point. It's not at the point where obviously I'm going to deliver you a pamphlet on the air-sea battle concept. It's something that we're still developing.
Do you have any idea when we might expect it?
Candidly, I would have to ask the services and come back to you on that. I think I would be speaking out of turn to say that I have an actual timeline for that.
Thank you, General. Madam Secretary, question on Guam. If we lost that fuel capacity, how long would it take us to replace it, and where would we have to get that energy from?
Mr. Chairman, I will have to get back to you on the date. I do know that there are other fuel sources in the Pacific, and that we would be perhaps the General can be more specific on where that would come from.
General, maybe you. Thank you, Mr.
I would say that I can address the specifics. The specifics are classified.
That's okay. Don't tell us anything classified.
And there are alternative fuel sources in the Pacific that we would leverage. There is a concern about the vulnerability of above ground facilities there. There is a resiliency effort going on by the Air Force. Currently, they have $300 million put against that. I'm not sure over the exact time period, but to address some of the vulnerability issues that we're going to have in this anti-access area denial environment. So I think we are looking at that and looking at the actions we need to take to make those facilities better protected. But I think also, as described earlier, we talked about this briefly in your office this morning, is it's more than just a single piece, a single system. It's more than hardening. It's really, as air-sea battle is attempting to address, it needs to address the end-to-end chain of operations. So it's complex and it's broad in nature.
Before we go to Ms. Bordello, Mr. Kissel has a quick follow-up question on it.
Just a quick question here. We talk about the fuel capacities, on Guam and other set places, a specific location. But one of our colleagues in the last Congress said, what about if, getting the fuel to the ships themselves, because you wouldn't want the ships to have to come back to a set location. What about the refueling capacity, at sea, in the midst of battle? Do we have the ships that can do that?
I'm not aware, candidly, I'm not aware of any shortages that we have in refueling the fleet. That one is best I can address, would need to address to the Navy.
Last question very quickly. If we had a protracted battle that went beyond with high-intensity operations, do we have the industrial base here to sustain that? And if so, for what period of time do you think?
Candidly, I don't think I'm not qualified to answer that.
Shiver, any idea?
I would have to also plead that when it comes to speaking to the industrial base in the United States, I'm not qualified to answer that, but we'll be happy to make sure that
if you could get us that information. And now, my colleague and friend from Guam, Ms. Berdella.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask my first question to Secretary Shiver, and that is regarding the concept of tangible progress with regards to the construction of a new Futenma facility and what that means for the realignment on Guam. What exactly is tangible progress, and when tangible progress occurs, what will that allow the United States to accomplish? And further, what must the United States be doing concurrently as the government of Guam or the government of Japan works through its processes to reach tangible progress in Okinawa?
Thank you. As we look at tangible progress on the Futenma replacement facility, we see it as not a single specific event, but rather a series of steps roughly in parallel between Japan and the United States, as spelled out in the realignment roadmap, the Guam International Agreement, and other bilateral agreements. It will allow us to move forward with the government of Japan as progress is made on the FRF, to in turn take associated steps that we have to take on Guam. There are a number of different indicators that we're looking at, starting with the decision on the runway configuration for FRF that we expect at the upcoming 2+2 meeting with Japan, and then other issues that we expect to come down the line, including issuance of the landfill permit, construction of the seawall, and progress on the landfill itself. The other critical point for the committee, which I know that you understand, is that preparation on Guam needs to begin well in advance of actual construction on the ground for the replacement facility at Camp Schwab, and that relocation of the Marines from Okinawa will be phased with completion of suitable infrastructure on Guam, sequenced in such a way as to maintain unit cohesion and operational readiness. And that's why this entire process has to move in lockstep, and why we need to look at all of the different indicators as we go along, including for one other item to offer, Japanese financing for infrastructure improvements on Guam as part of this continuum that comprises tangible progress and that will enable us to relocate from Futenma Air Station to the Futenma replacement facility, and to relocate the Marines from Okinawa to Guam.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I have one quick question, Mr. Chairman. This is for Secretary Fanasteel. As you know, last year's Defense Authorization Bill contained a provision that gave the Department of Defense with permissive authority to integrate the water and the wastewater lines on Guam. I have long believed that the Navy, indeed all services, should be out of the business of being a utility provider. And that said, I continue to believe that the integration of power in Guam provides us the right model for utility integration. In that case, Madam Secretary, Guam took over control of the Navy's power system, but did so after agreeing to reach certain performance milestones. Additionally, there was a third-party expert that helped to oversee the integration process and ensure that the agreed-upon milestones were met. However, this was all done at no cost to the ratepayers on Guam. Would you agree that this is a model that should be used for the consolidation of the water and wastewater system on Guam? And would you also agree that consolidation of the utilities should occur without burdening the ratepayers on Guam?
Thank you, Congressman Berdella. We are, in fact, working with the Guam Water Authority to interconnect with their lines, and some of the money that will come from the Japanese financing for infrastructure will be used to improve the infrastructure for the water facilities, the water on base. And those will be interconnected. Now, as I understand the agreement in the NDAA about the integration sets some conditions for meeting a performance standards before there could be such thing as an integration. And that's what happened with power. And so my suggestion with water is that we continue to work towards meeting the standards that will work for the needs of the Department of Defense as well as the Guam Water Agency.
Madam Secretary, I noticed in the agreement there that they're saying that the Navy should have a voting member on our utility board. Can you indicate where else in the United States that the Navy is a voting member on a utility board or any other local governing body? Isn't this a cumbersome requirement for the Navy or any service and intrusive to the federal-state local relationship?
I don't know of any place where it would be, but I believe that the requirement there was based on this need to make sure that certain operational standards were met, and I believe that was one way that could be done.
So your answer is then that nowhere else in the United States?
None that I know of,
right.
Congresswoman.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Medallia. Now the Chair recognizes Mr. Runyon from New Jersey for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank all three of you witnesses for coming out. General Alice, talking about readiness in a current light with how is Pacific Command engaging with our international partners over there to really address terrorism? I mean, you have elements of the Philippines, Indonesia, Southeast Asia that are obvious threats. How are our partners coming together, and do we need more resources and/or funding to accomplish this and be ready for that?
Thank you, sir. That's being addressed at multiple levels. Let me talk about kind of current events. As you're probably aware, we have a joint special operations task force operating in the southern Philippines of around 600 U.S. personnel. That's been there for a number of years and continues to be effective in addressing terrorist issues that were occurring in that part of the Philippines, I think, very effectively. So that's one specific instance. We're also concerned as we look at the South Asia region with the LET, or the Lashkar-e-Taiba terrorist group, which emanates out of Pakistan, but has a presence in India and Nepal and Bangladesh, and we're concerned how that is as you're. Let me backtrack for a second. As you're aware, the LET was responsible for the Mumbai attacks, where so many people lost their lives. So we're very concerned about that interaction that LET is having on India and the effect, the compression effect that you have between two nuclear powers when there is an attack into India from LET. So we're concerned about that very much in the South Asia area. We're attempting to address that by focusing not only in India but also in Bangladesh and Nepal to assure that we work on facilitation networks, and more importantly, how we address building the capacity of our partners to, in fact, address those internal issues so that they can secure their borders, so that they have developed networks for intelligence. They can develop intelligence on things that might be occurring inside of their country, and then also how they might, law enforcement and actual counterterrorism operations. So that's another line of our operation there, and we facilitate that mainly through our Theater Security Cooperation Plan, which addresses each of the countries in the Pacific AOR, and the ones that are specific concerns for terrorist activities. Clearly, a big part of that TCP is addressing that building partner capacity to address either endemic or military issues that are causing those situations to occur.
You kind of probably in the same realm to kind of diffuse the tensions also, with the South China Sea, the Taiwan Strait. Is that same kind of the same angle you're taking with that, or is it a totally different game?
I'm not entirely. The building partner capacity part of this, I think, is in a different sense. Of course, when we interact with the Chinese, it's a different interaction than we have with our allies and our partners. If that's what you're asking, sir. I
was just curious about how you're. We know there's a lot of tension there, specifically in the Strait and that type of thing, and how we're dealing with that moving forward. And I think again, and Mr. Shiver might want to comment also, I think the importance of
the interaction, military to military, between ourselves and the Chinese is of prime importance, and we do remain concerned that the nature of that interaction tends to be episodic at best.
Thank you very much. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Runyon. And now our submarine expert from Connecticut, Mr. Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, to follow up on Mr. Runyon's question, I mean, a test of that military-to-military relationship was the sinking of the Chonan, which, again, there was exhaustive forensic investigation that it was inescapable that it was a completely unprovoked attack by a North Korean mini-sub, and yet we were unable to get China's acknowledgement of, again, something that was just totally black and white, that North Korea was responsible for this. And, in terms of just the prospect of a productive military-to-military relationship, even government-to-government relationship, I mean, to be able to even succeed in terms of getting a basic baseline of what actually happened there, and in terms of just what impact that's going to have in terms of transit of traffic, both commercial and military, in that part of the world. I guess I would ask you to comment on that, Mr. Shiver, in terms of, it seems like that using that as a test, I mean, the relationship really is not doing that well, and maybe it's just episodic is the right way to describe it. The second question, in terms of readiness, is just that the press report showed that there was clearly a gap there in terms of sonar technology, in terms of being able to detect that mini-sub. And when you gave your list of investments and help that we're giving to our allies in that region, that was one of the items that I didn't hear it, and I'm just wondering if maybe you could address that, because clearly 46 sailors lost their lives because they didn't see that submarine coming or that attack.
Sure. Let me address part of the question and also then turn the floor to General Alice. I guess I would note first that when the Chonan incident occurred, our military-to-military relationship with the People's Republic of China was in one of its periodic and, from our perspective, very unfortunate periods of suspension, because the Chinese had suspended the relationship in January of last year following our announcement of an arms sales package to Taiwan. So we were actually unable at that point in time to have any discussions with the Chinese in the military channels about the Chonan. I'm not sure that would have made much of a difference, frankly, and much like you, we continue to be somewhat mystified by how the Chinese have approached what seems to us to be very, very clear evidence about culpability in the Chonan incident. We hope that now that we have resumed the military-to-military relationship with China, that we are going to be able to put it on stable and reliable footing, and that in so doing we'll be able to reduce misunderstanding, miscommunication, and misapprehension, and perhaps have some real discussions with them about some of the larger strategic issues in the region, including how we each view and approach North Korea. And that is certainly something that when Secretary Gates was in China this past January, he engaged on. Insofar as the readiness issue that you identified before turning things over to General Alice, I'll just note that the list that I offered was by necessity, given the open nature of this hearing, not complete, and obviously we'll be happy to brief any member of the committee that is interested in a closed session more fully on the fuller list of the capabilities that we're seeking to develop. But I certainly can say in this open setting that, as you are no doubt aware, we've undertaken a series of very robust exercises with our ROC ally since the sinking of the Chonan, including a number of exercises at sea off both coasts of Korea, and those exercises have been intended in no small part to increase ROC capabilities and increase alliance capabilities, precisely so that we're better postured to be able to respond to these sorts of provocations in the future.
And thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Shiver. I would make a couple of comments about Chonan. One is the nature of the attack was unexpected. It's unprovoked and unexpected. So from that standpoint, it was a surprise attack and a surprise to the Koreans. As indicated, a lot of our focus here in the near term has been increasing the capacity of the South Koreans in terms of ASW. We have conducted a number of ASW exercises with them to increase their capabilities in those areas. I think the Chinese remain concerned about the stability of North Korea in general, and I think that is a large part is a large calculus in how they respond to these situations here, though to us we, as already expect, are mystified on, given the evidence we saw for Chonan, that that was not attributed to the North Koreans. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Courtney. Just to let everybody know, we have 3 votes that have just been called. Our witnesses have graciously agreed to wait as we run over and do those and come back. But I want to try to get in one more set of questions, and so I'd like to turn now to the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Alice, I understand that the Department is reevaluating its pre-positioned stocks as a part of Secretary Gates' efficiency drills. And we're already beginning to see reductions in funding for PREPO in the 2012 budget that the Secretary just submitted to us. Was PACOM a part of this evaluation of the PREPO strategy?
Yes, sir. We were a part of that evaluation. I would note that we have calculated the effects of that as it's booked against our operations plans to ensure those plans remain viable in execution, and they are from our standpoint. So I can't address the whole worldwide posture of that. That's beyond my scope at PACOM. But from our standpoint of sourcing our plans and addressing the very difficult time-distance equation we have in the Pacific Theater, we're currently satisfied.
And you feel like that's going to be adequate in the near future? See, I'm given what's happening with the recent natural disaster in Japan and what it's going to pull from your resources and the volatility in North Korea, it seems to me that bringing those pre-positioned stocks down is risky. And you're saying you don't think that's true.
We addressed that was one of the concerns we addressed to the Department, was to ensure that we were looking beyond just the near term, really at the 5-year and beyond horizon, because of course the dynamic, the security posture in Asia is changing as we consider the rise of powers in Asia itself. So that was part of our calculation there, and part of our response back to the Department to ensure we had adequate stocks for our operations plans.
Okay. I understand that we need to get use out of every dollar, but I also want to make sure we're ready, and I have very real concerns about these reductions. We know that the readiness posture of PACOM is negatively affected by the ongoing military operations in Iraq and Afghanistan, and now by humanitarian assistance in Japan. How significant is the shortage of forces and equipment required to effectively deal with the broad range of security concerns in PACOM's area of operation?
So I would comment there, sir, that for our day-to-day theater security cooperation operations, I think we are adequately resourced, and I've had this conversation with Admiral Willard, my boss. There is a significant presence of U.S. forces from PACOM in Afghanistan and Iraq. Obviously, there is an effect of those forces. There's a long-term effect, I believe, about the strategic expression we're making by having those forces out of theater year after year after year, though we do have to address our operations. And I think as a long-term equation, we need to continue to look at that. It's having, though, probably a different effect you may not be aware of. As we have more of our as the ground forces are gone, obviously, to Iraq and Afghanistan, we're relying more on our air and our Navy forces. So that requires more basic steaming days or air operations days out of those forces, which is more wear and tear on those aircraft and those ships. It affects maintenance schedules and also the long-term viability of those. In other words, we're using those assets up because we're relying on them more with our deployment of ground forces out of theater.
What would you like to see this committee or this Congress do to help you with that wear and tear and that problem? that you just described?
Well, I think in one sense, as we continue on the continuing resolution, that's going to affect maintenance schedules for our ships and our aircraft because of funding levels that they don't have. That's one aspect of it. I think also we have to look at the long-term equation of what our shipbuilding program looks like.
Great. And just as a last point, I want to go back to this prepositioned stocks. When I asked you if PACOM had been involved in the evaluation, did you feel any pressure from the Secretary's office or the administration to tell them what they wanted to hear on that issue?
No, sir. I think we had a robust dialogue with them and clearly expressed what our positions were.
Excellent. Thank you, General. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we're going to stand in recess until the conclusion of these votes, and then we'll come back. We thank you for your patience, and probably going to take us about 20 minutes, I would imagine. Maybe about 30 minutes before we get back. So feel free to go out in the hall, do whatever you need to do, and we'll be back. Thank you. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Kissel, for 5 minutes. Mr. Kissel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to our witnesses for being here. Mr. Chairman, I couldn't help but being a past world history teacher, I couldn't help but to enjoy your story this morning about Pearl Harbor. When I was teaching, I would start out every semester by reading the preamble to a book, and I believe it was Flyboys, but don't quote me on that. And it talked about that the Japanese surprised the fleet, caught them in the harbor in December, and the end result of the battle was they sunk all the fleet. And I would tell my students, if you can tell me where that happened, I will give you an A for the semester, and you don't have to come to class. You can do whatever you want. And all of them would raise their hands, and of course they thought it was Pearl Harbor. And I said, well, the next line in the book says that President Roosevelt wrote a letter to the Japanese and congratulated them on the great victory. And that stopped them a little bit. It was 1905. It was the Russians. We have a great capacity to think we have all the answers, and we have to keep looking for the things that may surprise us. The reason I asked the question, General, earlier about the supply ships, Gene Taylor was one of our former colleagues that was very knowledgeable of these things, and I remember one session he was very concerned about, how do we resupply the oil to when we're on the seas in the battle, and do we have enough oilers, and he had concerns whether we did or not. And I will follow up with this with a question, and you can take it off the record. My question being this: if we're in a prolonged engagement in the Western Pacific, do we have the resources to, the chairman asked about, do we have the industrial resources? Well, let's, not answering that, but do we have the resources, the capacity, whether it be ships, airplanes, whatever, to get what we need on a continuing basis to where the engagement may be? And whoever, feel free. And I encourage you to be brief, because I have a couple other questions.
I would, you can't get obviously into classified discussions here. I would need to answer specifics off the record, but generally I would say yes, we do have the capacities we need in the terms of resupply for the plans that I have booked right now, sir. Okay, good.
One country we haven't specifically mentioned, even though we said in the general area, is Vietnam. Where do we see Vietnam emerging, or do we see them emerging in terms of the military, but where do we see them emerging politically, especially as it relates to our relationship with China? And once again, whoever wants to jump at this one.
I think as a general statement, we've been extraordinarily pleased by the progress that we've made in our relationship with Vietnam over the past number of years since normalization, and we certainly look to deepen and strengthen the relationship that we have between the United States and Vietnam in the years ahead.
Does China view that as a threat? Because historically, that's those two countries have been at odds.
I wouldn't speak and couldn't speak about Beijing's threat perception, but certainly, as you note, China and Vietnam have had a rocky history of their own. and I'm certain that there are those in Beijing that probably do view our burgeoning relationship with Vietnam in a less than favorable light. From our perspective, our deepening and strengthening relationship with Vietnam and our desire to enter into a genuine partnership with Vietnam is a relationship that we pursue in and of itself. It's not about China. It's about the United States and Vietnam. But I should also note that we don't have any illusions, given our own history with Vietnam, about the future of that relationship either. There are issues that we have to continue to work at. There are human rights questions that we still have in terms of how Vietnam treats some of its own religious minorities that we still need to be able to cycle through as well.
Okay. Thank you, and thank you once again for your patience. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Kissel. And now someone who the Pacific is near and dear to her heart, the gentlelady from Hawaii.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't believe we can discuss readiness out of the context of what has happened and what the implications of what happened, the devastation and the catastrophe in Japan. Having said that, I would like to know, Japan is considered like our anchor partner in terms of our security defenses in the Pacific. What impact is the tsunami and the earthquake having on whatever strategic locations we have in Japan? Mr. Secretary, you could answer that.
Certainly. I mean, to begin with, I would say that it would be speculative at best at this point to comment on any of the longer-term implications of the earthquake and the tsunami. But I would note that certainly I think the assistance that we've been able to offer, the engagement of the U.S. military and the U.S. government across the board in response to this crisis has helped to strengthen the bonds that we have between our two countries and help make a case, I think, for the logic of why we have a forward deployed presence in the Asian Pacific region, including the basing footprint that we have in Japan.
I understand that part, Mr. Secretary. I guess my question is more in line of what role does Japan play, if any, in our readiness posture in the Pacific, and how is it now going to be affected by what has happened?
Japan is the cornerstone of our approach to security issues in the Asian Pacific region, and there's a reason why we term it that way, and it's not just rhetoric. I mean, Japan is an incredibly important ally. The contributions that they bring to the alliance, including our basing footprint in Japan, is absolutely critical to our enduring presence in the Asia Pacific region. I have absolutely no reason to believe that anything that has transpired in the past few days following the earthquake and the tsunami will undermine the commitment, the depth, the strength of the U.S.-Japan alliance. As I noted, I think just to the contrary, that we'll emerge from this, and that Japan will emerge from this with a closer, better, and deeper relationship.
One of the issues that we are aware of is the fact that the Japanese government structure has changed. You know, that we've gone from, since I think 1955, when the Liberal Democratic Party actually had control of their parliament, and now we have the Democratic Party of Japan. And I don't believe necessarily the Democratic Party of Japan felt as strong about our military presence as the Liberal Democratic Party. Do you feel that somehow that structure is now going to be affected as well?
I would offer that we've been extraordinarily happy to be working with the DPJ government over the past year. As I noted in my opening statement, the Prime Minister, the Defense Minister, the Foreign Minister, Chief Cabinet Secretary, all the senior members of the DPJ government have made very, very strong and forward-leaning statements about the value of the alliance, the value of the U.S. military presence in Japan and about their commitment to move forward with the realignment roadmap and FRF. So we view them as a good and strong partner.
I understand that what you're saying, but isn't it true that the reality of it is that as to Futemba and the transfer, that Japan has yet to come up with approximately their $6 billion of the $10 billion price tag for Futemba, and given the disaster, given the catastrophe, what are the probabilities that they're going to pay for the move of the part of the Marines from Futemba to Guam?
Well, I mean, again, I think that would be highly speculative. I guess I'll note that Japan has offered $415.5 million in funding for Guam infrastructure improvements in the Japan fiscal year 2011 budget. That's already been approved by their lower house. We expect it to be fully approved, and that we're not aware of any effort, have not heard any voices in the past few days that would suggest that funding is not going to go forward.
So have you heard an affirmation that even if they've got this critical situation where they're going to be rebuilding a huge part of that nation, that they're still going to continue with the commitments to the United States?
The discussions that we've been having with the government of Japan in the past few days have been how to respond to the immediate humanitarian crisis and the situation at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. Once we have managed to deal with the management of the immediate consequences, the thousands of people that have died, the hundreds of thousands that are internally displaced, and the ongoing situation with the nuclear power plant, I'm sure we will have those discussions, and I'm fully confident that the government of Japan will continue to be positively engaged.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for your questions. To follow up on what the gentlelady from Hawaii was asking, Mr. Shiver, you and General Alice have both talked about the importance of our allies working in a partnership fashion for us to be able to do the type of defense that we need in the Pacific. Have there been any thoughts about perhaps selling some export version of the F-22 to Japan or any of our other allies, given the fact that we are concerned perhaps that the Russians may be selling their PAC F-8 to other players across the world? And if we did that, and I'm not suggesting we do, I'm just asking for thoughts, but there's arguments that it would help bring the cost of the F-22 down in doing that. Have there ever been any discussions about doing that?
I think Secretary Gates is very, very clear in where he is on the F-22 program, and as I did not bring along a copy of my letter of resignation in my backpack, that will be the entirety of my remarks on the issue.
Well placed, Mr. General.
I would just
we don't want you resigning either.
No, I won't. I'll leave the F-22 to Mr. Shiver. But
okay.
I just comment that we have had discussions with the Japanese about what their needs are in terms of aviation requirements. We think the F-35 makes a very logical fit for them. I think it's what they're exploring currently, so that makes imminent sense to us in many ways, considering I think it more adequately addresses the defense of Japan needs. I think another aspect of this, back to our allies and partners in the region, is in the Northeast Asia region, we're seeing increased levels of cooperation between the government of South Korea and Japan. Even this recent tragedy shows a degree of cooperation between them in terms of assistance. So we're encouraged by that and by the trilateral cooperation that we're having between the three sides.
Madam Secretary, I'm going to let you slide on that question, and we're going to go to Ms. Bordello for.
Mr. Chairman, if you would bear with me, I have a number of questions to ask. I really just want to get answers for the record, and so if the witnesses could make it very brief. First, Secretary Fanasteel, now that the programmatic agreement has been signed, when can we expect task orders to be issued to MAC contract awardees, and when will some initial construction efforts get underway on Guam?
Congressman Bordello, we will be issuing contracts and notices to proceed on several of these contracts very soon. I mean, we have some that have actually, contracts have already been awarded. We'll be able to issue notices to proceed on those. On a number of others, we have specific dates that we're ready to go on them.
Very good. Regarding the training ranges, I hope that General Alice can help to answer this. The QDR addresses training in the Pacific. General, can you describe the current challenges to training in this region, and also are there any efforts by PACOM to lead a comprehensive approach to develop a truly effective solution to training issues in the future?
Thank you, ma'am. There is an effort on the part of PACOM to start an EIS, which actually I think the funding is in the current year's budget, that would address holistically the issues for PACOM as far as joint training is concerned across the Pacific region. So I think that addresses partially the issues on Guam. We've discussed earlier the siting of ranges on Guam itself and the need for individual training of the Marines in terms of small arms and those issues, and where the broader degrees of training can be conducted throughout the theater. One of our prime considerations, though, is, as we have discussed, is that we maintain ready forces throughout our region. We think that's critical as a deterrence aspect, so very important to us at the combatant commanders level that we're able to train our Marines, soldiers, sailors, airmen across their range of required skills.
Thank you. Secretary Fanasteel, I hope that you can help me better understand the rationale for a firing range on Guam. I have long expressed my concern about the preferred alternative location for the firing range on Guam. The Marine requirements seem to have shifted since the beginning of the EIS process in 2006, and as such, why are these individual qualifications needed to be met on Guam? Has a cost-benefit analysis, and I think we talked about this earlier, been conducted to determine why the island of Tinian may or may not be feasible?
We have looked at the island of Tinian, and in fact we'll be doing some group training there, but the individual qualifying training needs to be on site close to where the Marines will be. We've looked at the ability to move the Marines as it would be required, to move them to Tinian often, to support them there, to move them back. You end up not just with a lot of additional expense, you reduce the time that they have to train. You reduce the throughput of training for them. Given all of that, we've concluded that the training needs to be on the island of Guam, and we have sought for, since we've been doing the process, to find a place on the island of Guam that meets the needs, that is sufficient sized, that has the least impact on the community, that does not interfere with business or recreation, that is operationally safe, which is why we ended up with a preferred alternative that we're now looking at.
Yes. Another question for you, Secretary. Many institutions of higher learning have cooperative agreements with DoD to support the mission and provide technical studies and analysis. Are you open to developing a cooperative agreement with the University of Guam? And what steps are you taking to get an agreement on a cooperative agreement?
We have the highest respect. I personally have the highest respect for the University of Guam and Dr. Underwood. I've met with him every time I've gone to Guam. I believe that the university is a true asset for the island. I'm not sure what the cooperative agreement is that you'd be proposing, but I'm certainly open to talking about it.
Thank you. And another one I have for you, Secretary. As you know, included in the record of decision was a commitment to adaptive program management throughout the duration of the military buildup. However, there is still a lack of common understanding of APM's specific meaning for the buildup. What role do you see APM and CMCC playing in the relocation moves forward?
The adaptive program management was developed as a way of slowing, if necessary, the activity of the buildup to keep from overwhelming the infrastructure of the island, whether it's water or wastewater or power or roads or any other aspect of the infrastructure. So the idea is that as the buildup happens, as construction happens, we'll look continually at the logistics that are needed and slow down or change the schedule. and the CMCC, the Civilian Military Coordinating Council, would be the oversight body that would meet and decide whether the buildup was in fact moving too fast, whether it needed to be slowed down in some aspect. Right now, we're in the process of working with the other parties who would be involved in this to develop the operating charter for the CMCC.
A follow-up on this now. If a project related to the buildup is causing significant environment impacts, how will DOD adequately adapt given the short time frame for the buildup?
I believe it would depend on what the impacts would be, what the project would be. We are working with Environmental Protection Agency and many other resources agencies to mitigate where we can, to slow down if that's what would be required.
Right. And I have a further question for you, Secretary. Throughout the course of this series of hearings on Are We Ready, we have discussed the element of risk in the operations and maintenance. Now, I'd like to bring an element of serious risk in the acquisition strategy for the military buildup on Guam. The current acquisition strategy requires that each contractor provides a certain level of medical care at each work site, as well as health insurance coverage. The plan also calls for the pre-screening of any guest workers at their origin. The fragmented strategy could result in 7 different plans for how to care for workers. Given the state of the healthcare system on Guam, I think this part of the plan assumes way too much risk for our overall health infrastructure. So can you detail for the committee why this strategy was settled on and what steps are being taken to ensure that the pre-deployment screening of guest workers is done to a certain standard?
Congresswoman, the concern here was to specifically avoid overwhelming the medical facilities available on Guam. So it became part of the contract award process that the contractors would have to provide medical care for their workers. That's an important part of what determined whether they would be selected. Our expectation is that these workers will be able to be treated by their employers. If they need to go to the hospital for stabilization, they would do that. Then they would be airlifted off. They would be able to put the least possible impact on the island's existing medical facilities. In terms of screening before they came, we would have to ensure that that would happen and that it would be effective.
Can I get your word on working with my office further on this detail?
Oh, absolutely. I'd be glad to do that.
Very good. And one last question for you. The Micronesian Biosecurity Plan was developed by various federal agencies to include the DOD and DOI to determine how to address the risks of terrestrial and marine invasive species to the Micronesian region resulting from the buildup. So can you tell me how the DOD will implement the MBP and what proactive actions the DOD will take to prevent new invasive species from being introduced?
We have a fairly elaborate plan of how it would work, and I'd be glad to get that more information on that to your office. I think that would probably be more productive than trying to walk through the various pieces of it here.
Very good, because we do have enough brown tree snakes now forever. General Alice, the lease for the Guam shipyard is up next year. General, can you address what level of readiness a forward deployed ship repair capability provides PACOM?
Ma'am, I'll have to take that one for the record. I'm not in a position to address that one, but I can definitely get you the answer.
Very good. And Mr. Chairman, that concludes. I just wanted the answers to these questions for the record.
Thank you, and feel free to supplement any of those answers that you have for the record. Just a couple more questions. Admiral Willard, when he was here, I believe last year, gave some testimony about the number of ships in the Chinese Navy. Do you have any idea how many ships the Chinese have in their Navy today?
I can comment on their modernization. The specific numbers I would need to get it absolutely right.
Could you just get those numbers for us and supply them to us? And Mr. Shiver, today's March 15th, 2011, 10 years from now, do you have any idea, if we continue on the same building plan we're on right now, how will the number of submarines that we have in our Navy compare with the number of submarines the Chinese will have based on our projections of what they're building?
I will have to get back to you on the record in terms of the exact number.
And I understand, but if you could get that number back to us so we can see it. The other thing, General, you and I talked the other day. One of the interesting things right now, most of our strategies are dependent upon our forces being able to attack and then move back to sanctuaries where they have basically safe harbors at that particular point in time. But if we had a major conflict in the Pacific, more likely than not, those safe harbors or sanctuaries wouldn't be available. So my question is, do U.S. forces typically operate under degraded battle network conditions when training for operations in the Western Pacific? And if so, what are the key lessons we've learned from such training? And if not, why are we not training in this manner, especially since the Chinese military writings cite our battle networks as our Achilles heel?
I think one of the areas that we've identified that we will continue to work on is the need to be able to operate in emissions-controlled environments, and that's an important. That's something certainly we have done in a robust nature in the past. It's an area that we need to address now and into the future. It is not an area that's not being ignored. It's not an area that we don't ever practice to. But I think, like other issues, as we look at a potential country that would be a near peer, we're going to have to look at the kinds of training we're doing and how we prepare for that kind of a situation.
And if you could keep our subcommittee posted on your progress on that, we would appreciate it. The other thing, our Navy and Air Forces, are they trained and ready to operate under sustained loss degradation based on space capabilities and capacities? Because we know that we see the Chinese perhaps looking at taking away some of those capabilities. Are we training to deal with that degradation if it were to take place?
Again, we're looking at that during our exercises. I think there's more improvement that we can gain in those areas, both in the type of technology we're using that provides a more robust space network as far as jam resistance, those kinds of things, and also from the standpoint of practicing those types of operations in degraded environments. There's certainly improvement that could be done there. I don't want to imply there is not practice at all now. That would be an incorrect statement, too.
And the last question, maybe all three of you could take a bite at this, at how we can do better. I want to go back to the very first question that I raised, and it's the fact that the Secretary did direct the Air Force and the Navy to develop an air-sea battle concept to address the growing anti-access and area denial problem, which many people feel is the most acute in the Western Pacific. We know from writings that this challenge has been emerging really for the better part of the last decade, and yet we have the instruction come out last year to develop the concept, and all of your testimonies today were that it was evolving. What takes us so long to create a concept to respond to a threat that we have? Any suggestions on how we can cut that timeline down?
I think that's an excellent question, Mr. Chairman, and one that I would very much like to be able to take back and consult with some of my colleagues on, so we can provide you with a better answer as to how we might be able to be more nimble in our own thinking.
And Mr. Schiffer, I'd appreciate it. And we're not pointing the finger at you. We're pointing the finger at us too, and we want to work in a partnership so that we can respond faster. And we'd love to have that dialogue and any input that you can give us to how we can make that work better. General, you've lived this most of your career. Any suggestions?
I think I don't have the answer for what takes so long. I do think that this has come into a much better focus here over the past few years on the direction that China has gone with this anti-access area denial strategy of theirs. And as it has come into focus, I think that's what's moving us towards action in this one area in air-sea battle and numerous other areas.
And General, one thing I would just throw out, we're not just limiting it to the denial or anti-access denial problem. It is generally, when we're trying to deal with these concepts, sometimes it just takes us so long to get our arms around it. I know in many hearings that we had, we were talking about this very problem, and we'd have the Department of Defense telling us it's no problem, it's no problem, it's no problem. And then it seems like everybody went to bed one night and woke up the next morning and said, oh my gosh, it's a problem. And so we just would appreciate any insight you have from your years of experience in how we can make that better. Madam Secretary, I know not particularly on this issue, but on a lot of the other issues across agencies, you've lived with us a long time too. What are your suggestions of how we cope with it a little bit faster?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure that I have any wisdom beyond what my colleagues here have offered. I am, as you note, relatively new to the Pentagon and the processes. I see dedication. I see very knowledgeable people who are answering questions as well as they can. And I believe that the interaction with Congress is strong and is positive. Clearly, if I have any ideas on this, I will share. I'd be glad to share them with you.
We're about out of time. I just want to give our witnesses any couple of minutes that you need something we've left out that you think was important or you got shortchanged on that you didn't get to get in the record. Mr. Shiver?
No, Mr. Chairman. I think we've had ample opportunity, and thank you very much for the for this chance to come up and engage in this important dialogue with you.
Thank you, Mr. Shiver. General?
I would just mention what we kind of discussed in your office, which is we look at this issue of anti-access area denial. It's we're in a kind of a formative period here, and the support of Congress in working on these particular programs, I think, will be essential to addressing the issue.
Good. Thank you. Madam Secretary?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank you and Congressman Bordallo for the opportunity to come and talk about what I see as a very important part of our Pacific posture. And I know that Guam is one piece of it, but I think for many of us it is a key strategic piece.
Well, thank you for our doors remain open to all three of you, anything that we can do to help. And I'd like to leave with Ms. Bordallo with the closing comments.
Just a few seconds, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you very much for focusing on. This is a very important move for the military, probably one of the biggest in the history, I understand. It's going to cost our government and the government of Japan about $16 billion when all is concluded. And I just want to thank you very much for focusing on the Asia-Pacific area and its importance.
Good. With that, we're adjourned. Thank you all very much.